I live a quiet, somewhat predictable life with my husband, Jerry. Most days drift by with the familiar hum of routine, Jerry fussing over his morning newspaper and breakfast sandwich while keeping an eye on the weather forecast on TV. But that particular evening, the usual tranquility of our home was interrupted in the most unexpected way. It was past bedtime, and the house was enfolded in silence, save for the gentle ticking of the living room clock and the occasional rustling of leaves outside, stirred by a gentle wind. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, a sharp sound that seemed louder in the night's quiet. I wasn't expecting anyone at such a late hour, and the sound startled me out of my drowsiness. I walked to the front door with a mix of caution and curiosity, peering through the peephole before opening it. There, in the pouring rain, stood my grandson, Sam, looking utterly forlorn. He wasn't alone. On his back, secured in a makeshift sling, slept his little sister, Holly. The sight of them, especially Sam, drenched and downtrodden, pulled at my heartstrings. "Sam, what brings you here so late? Is something wrong?" I asked, my voice filled with concern. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gently shifted Holly into my arms without waking her. "Can my sister stay here tonight? And for dinner too?" His voice was so soft, almost drowned out by the relentless downpour. "First, come inside," I insisted, stepping aside to let them in. Jerry and I ushered them gently, towels in hand, trying to dry them off as they stepped into the warmth of our living room. There was a joy in my heart at seeing them, especially noticing how much Sam had grown since the last time. But this joy was tinged with worry due to the circumstances of their unexpected visit and Sam's somber demeanor. As I settled Holly on the couch, tucking a blanket around her, I noticed Sam's reluctance to join us at the dinner table where a warm meal awaited. He just stood there, looking down, lost in thought. "Sam, is there something heavy on your mind? Can you talk about it?" I asked, reaching out to touch his shoulder. He glanced up, meeting my eyes only briefly, before looking away again. The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Unable to bear it, Jerry spoke up, his tone stern, which was uncharacteristic of him when addressing the grandchildren. Sam flinched at Jerry's words, then began to speak in a thin, tentative voice. He unraveled his worries, his fears, and at the end, he dropped a bombshell that shook me to my core. "I'm a burden to the family. Could you please take care of Holly?" His words were resolute, yet there was an unmistakable crack in his voice. Before we could respond, he stood abruptly, heading towards the door. "Sam, wait. Don't run away," I called out as Jerry hurried after him. Sam, now nearly as tall as Jerry, forcefully shook off his hand. "Don't run away from this. Taking care of a child isn't that simple," Jerry yelled, his voice a mix of anger and desperation. He ran after Sam, grabbing him tightly in an attempt to stop him. At least, Sam's resistance waned, and he remained silent, his head hanging low over Jerry's chest. The gravity of the moment weighed heavily on all of us, as rain continued to tap a somber rhythm against the windows. As Jerry reminisced, I pondered the complexities of our family dynamics. Our relationship with Ian and his family had become strained, not abruptly, but gradually, like a slow-moving storm cloud that you don't notice until it's directly overhead, casting a shadow over what was once sunny. Ian had met his first wife at the construction company where he worked right after high school. She was a few years older, and they were quickly married. But that marriage did not last. When he remarried Jasmine, things started to change. It wasn't that Jasmine was unkind or anything overt, she simply seemed less keen on fostering family ties, which in turn influenced Ian. The distance grew so subtly that at first, we barely noticed. But over time, missed birthdays, holidays without a visit, and unanswered messages piled up like unopened letters in a drawer. It hurt, especially seeing how it affected Jerry, who had always been a family man at heart. "Now he's a high school freshman," Jerry continued, his thoughts on Sam bringing a wistful smile to his face. "He probably understands now that tuna fishing isn't so simple." I smiled softly, thinking of Sam's youthful enthusiasm about fishing with Jerry, a plan that seemed so tangible then. When you retire, you'll have plenty of time to make good on that promise, I reassured him, though I wondered if that gap could still be bridged after all this time. Jerry nodded, taking a slow sip of his tea. His gaze lingered on the family photo, the smiles captured in it belying the complexity of the relationships behind those happy faces. Carolyn, it might be wise not to hang the laundry outside today, Jerry repeated, snapping me back to the present. I looked out the window at the sky, heavy with the promise of rain, mirroring my thoughts, clouded and unsure. Yes, I suppose you're right, I replied, my voice carrying a mixture of agreement and resignation. The laundry would have to wait, much like many things in our life seem to be waiting, for the right moment, for a mending of ways, for new beginnings after Jerry's retirement. As these thoughts swirled in my head, I glanced at the newspaper Jerry had left on the table, smeared slightly with the remnants of his breakfast sandwich. Decide whether you're reading it or eating it, please, I teased, trying to lighten the mood. Jerry chuckled, a brief sound that didn't quite mask the underlying sadness. Some habits are hard to break, he said, his eyes not meeting mine. In that moment, I realized that retirement for Jerry wouldn't just be about finding hobbies or keeping busy. It would be about reconnecting, rebuilding, perhaps not just with hobbies, but with our family too. As challenging as it might be, it seemed necessary, inevitable. Like the approaching storm, change was on the horizon, ready or not. Me wonder about the depth of his young mind. Sam, even as a child, had an unusual level of awareness and sensitivity. It was perhaps this quality that made him so endearing and also so concerning, as he seemed to carry a weight beyond his years. His mother, Ian's first wife, had been a pillar of strength and grace, even in her final days. Her serene acceptance of her fate and her concern for Sam and Ian's well-being left a profound impact on us all. Carolyn, please look after my son for me, she had said in the hospital, her voice steady despite the circumstances. It was a request I wouldn't deny. Her passing marked a significant change in our lives. Ian, swallowed by his grief and the demands of his job, struggled to maintain the balance at home. As a result, I found myself stepping into the role she had left vacant. Every day after my part-time job, I would head to their home, ensuring Sam had his meals, helped with his homework, and received the love and attention he needed. On weekends, when Ian was often caught up at work, Jerry and I gladly welcomed Sam to our home. It was during these times that Jerry and Sam grew especially close, their bond deepening over shared activities and conversations. Is there anywhere you'd like to go? Let's go wherever Grandpa and Grandma want to, Sam would say, always putting our preferences first. It was heartwarming, yet it made me reflect on how much he had to mature prematurely. He was just a child, yet he was always so considerate, always thinking of others, before himself. Sam's attentiveness wasn't just limited to us. He seemed to observe and process everything around him with a thoughtful demeanor. It was as if he was constantly learning, adapting, and trying to understand the adult world at such a young age. Indeed, the house was often filled with laughter, thanks to Ian's humor and Sam's cheerful presence. Despite the undercurrent of loss, we managed to create a loving environment for Sam. His mother had left him a legacy of strength and resilience, which was evident in how he carried himself. I remembered the days when Ian, influenced by his first wife, had started to take on household responsibilities. He had tried to use a knife with his left hand, mirroring her, despite being right-handed. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes about his effort and the influence she had on him. Thanks to Ian, our home is always filled with laughter, I had often remarked, appreciating the lightness he brought into our lives despite the challenges. The memory of Ian skillfully making soup, a skill he acquired from his first wife to support her through her illness, was particularly poignant. I was always grateful for how she had shaped him into the man he had become, a caring, involved father and a more thoughtful partner. Even after she was gone, her presence was felt in our interactions, in the way Ian approached life, and most significantly, in the gentle nature of Sam, who had inherited so much of her grace and kindness. Yes, I like it okay, Sam replied, his voice carrying a hint of reservation that didn't escape my notice. We were sitting in our living room, a rare moment of quiet togetherness since he had moved to the new school. His eyes were focused on a puzzle we were piecing together, but his mind seemed elsewhere. "You've made some new friends?" I probed gently, trying to gauge his comfort in this new chapter of his life. "Yeah, a few," he said, fitting a piece into the puzzle with meticulous care. "They're nice." I nodded, watching him intently. It was clear he was trying to adapt, to find his footing in a rapidly changing environment. Sam had always been resilient, perhaps too much so for his age. It worried me that he might be taking on more than he should, always considering others before himself. When Ian had announced his plans to remarry, it was a shock. Jasmine, despite her youth and vitality, seemed underprepared for the role of a stepmother, especially to a sensitive boy like Sam. My concerns had only deepened when they moved into my husband's brother's house, further away from us. It felt like a physical and emotional distancing that I feared might affect Sam adversely. However, every time Ian left Sam with us for their date nights, I saw a different side of the situation. These moments, though born from circumstances that stirred mixed feelings in me, were invaluable. They allowed Jerry and I to maintain our bond with Sam, to ensure he still felt the support and love of his grandparents. "Sam, if there's ever anything you want to talk about, or if something's bothering you, you know you can always come to us, right?" I said, reaching out to place my hand over his. He looked up from the puzzle, meeting my gaze with those thoughtful, mature eyes of his. "I know, Grandma." "Thank you," he replied, a small smile breaking through. It was a relief, yet a reminder of the careful balance we had to maintain, giving him the space to grow, while also being his safe harbor. The dynamic within our extended family had certainly shifted with Jasmine's arrival and their move. Yet, as I watched Sam interact with us and handle his new life, I was reminded of the strength and adaptability he had inherited from his mother. It was these qualities that gave me hope, even amidst my worries, that he would thrive despite the challenges. Still, as a grandmother, I couldn't help but feel a protective urge, a desire to shield him from any potential heartaches or hardships that might come from his new living arrangement and the responsibilities thrust upon him too early. These thoughts lingered in the back of my mind as I continued to engage with him, cherishing the moments we had together and ensuring he knew he was loved and supported, no matter what. They were doing well and weren't facing any troubles we didn't know about. The lack of contact, especially direct interaction with Sam and Holly, left a hollow feeling in my heart. Over time, it became more challenging to bridge the growing distance, and each failed attempt to visit or engage added another layer of concern. I would often reflect on the days when Sam and Holly were just here, running around our home, filling it with laughter and energy. Sam, now growing into his teenage years, and Holly, blossoming in her own right, were missing from our lives in a way that felt unnatural and forced. The situation with Ian and Jasmine was complex. Their need for financial support became a regular pattern, and although it was never easy to deny help, especially when it concerned the grandchildren, Jerry and I started to feel used rather than valued as family members. It wasn't the money that was the issue, it was the way our relationship seemed transactional, revolving around what we could provide rather than the familial bonds we longed to maintain. On quieter evenings, Jerry and I would discuss how we could better connect with Ian and Jasmine without stepping over boundaries or causing tension. It was a delicate balance, trying to remain present in our grandchildren's lives without intruding into Ian and Jasmine's family dynamics. The idea that perhaps we had done something to upset them often crossed my mind. Had we been too forward? Too eager? It was a maze of second-guessing and regret, but deep down, I knew we had always approached them with nothing but love and the best intentions. All we could do was hope that with time, things might change. Perhaps Ian and Jasmine would see our earnest desire to be a part of their lives, not as intruders, but as loving supporters. Maybe they would understand that our involvement wasn't about undermining their authority or questioning their decisions, but about sharing the joy and responsibility of raising a family. Every time the phone rang or a message came through, my heart would leap with the hope that it might be Ian or even Sam. I longed for a simple update, a photo, or a message saying they were thinking of us. But as days turned to weeks, and weeks to months, the silence grew heavier, and the hope that once buoyed my spirits began to wane. Yet, in the depths of that silence, my resolve grew. I would not let the current circumstances define our future relationship. Whether it took weeks, months, or even years, I was prepared to wait, to give them the space they seemed to need, while also remaining ready to open our doors and hearts the moment they chose to return. In the meantime, Jerry and I would keep the memories of our times together alive, cherishing each laugh, each hug, and every single day we had been blessed to share with Sam and Holly. Seeing Sam in such a state, with his clothes soaked and clinging to his tired frame, stirred a deep concern within me. The weight of Holly on his back, both literally and metaphorically, seemed immense for such a young boy. As we ushered them inside, I could see the weariness in Sam's eyes, a look that spoke volumes about the struggles they must have been facing, hidden from our view. Once inside, Jerry took Sam's wet jacket and backpack, placing them near the heater to dry. I took Holly to the kitchen, where I quickly warmed up some soup and sandwiches. Despite her young age, Holly seemed remarkably composed, a stark contrast to the usual exuberance of a 4-year-old. It was evident that these children had been through more than we had realized during our time apart. "Sam, talk to me. What's been happening?" I urged as we sat down at the kitchen table. He hesitated, his gaze fixed on the floor, before he finally met my eyes. The vulnerability in his expression was heartbreaking. "I've been doing deliveries after school," Sam began, his voice barely above a whisper. "It helps with the bills. Dad's job isn't enough these days." The revelation hit hard. The money I had been sending for birthdays clearly wasn't sufficient to cover their needs. The thought of Sam, just a high school student, taking on such responsibilities to support his family was distressing. It made me reconsider every interaction we had, or hadn't had, over the past few years. "And tonight, the rain," he continued, his voice trailing off as he glanced towards Holly, who was quietly eating her meal. "It was pouring, and I didn't want Holly to get too wet on the way home from daycare. I didn't have enough for a taxi, so we had to walk until I saw the bus stop and waited there. That's when I decided to come here," Sam concluded, the weight of his day evident in his slumped posture. Jerry, who had been listening quietly, placed a comforting hand on Sam's shoulder. "You did the right thing coming here, Sam. You're both safe here, always." The room filled with an emotional silence, the only sound being the rain drumming relentlessly against the windows. As I watched Sam and Holly, a mix of relief and sorrow washed over me. Relief that they had come to us, to safety, and sorrow for all the unseen hardships they had endured. The reality of our grandchildren's lives, so different from the happy and carefree existence we had hoped for them, was a stark reminder of how distant Ian and Jasmine had allowed us to become. It was clear that moving forward, Jerry and I needed to be more proactive in our efforts to support Ian's family, not just financially, but emotionally and physically as well. As we settled the children for the night, my resolve strengthened. No matter the circumstances, Jerry and I would be there for Sam and Holly, offering them the stability and love they desperately needed. This unexpected visit, though born out of necessity and struggle, was a pivotal moment, realigning our priorities as grandparents and reaffirming our role in their lives. Hearing Sam's story unfold in such a raw and emotional way tore at my heartstrings. I couldn't believe that our absence had been framed as disinterest, rather than a result of the barriers Jasmine had put up. It pained me deeply to think of Sam and Holly believing we didn't care for them, when in reality, nothing could have been further from the truth. "We would never think of you as a hassle, Sam. You and Holly are the lights of our life," I assured him, trying to dispel the hurtful lies he had been told. I felt a renewed urgency to reconnect the bonds that had been so maliciously misrepresented. Sam wiped his eyes, nodding slowly as he absorbed my words. The room was filled with a heavy silence, broken only by the soft ticking of the kitchen clock and the occasional distant rumble of thunder. I could see Jerry's jaw clench at the thought of how his grandchildren had been treated, his hands forming tight fists at his sides. "We're here for you, always. No matter what," Jerry said, his voice firm yet gentle, reassuring Sam of our unconditional support. As we sat at the dinner table, I served the warm meal I had prepared, hoping that the familiar comfort food would help ease some of the tension and sadness that had filled the room. Sam ate quietly, his appetite not quite matching his usual enthusiasm, but he seemed to relax slightly as the meal went on. Holly, thankfully still oblivious to the complexities of the situation, slept soundly in the guest room. After dinner, while Jerry cleaned up, I sat down with Sam in the living room. "We need to make sure you and Holly can come over anytime you need to, without hesitation," I said, thinking out loud about practical steps we could take to ensure they never felt abandoned again. "We could set up a savings account for you, if you're okay with that," I suggested. "A little emergency fund that you can access whenever you need it. For times like today, or just whenever you feel like you need a break or some support." Sam looked up, his eyes reflecting a mix of surprise and relief. "Really? Would that be okay?" "Of course," I assured him. "You're not alone in this. We want to help in more tangible ways." He nodded, the tension visibly easing from his shoulders. "Thank you, Grandma." I didn't know how much I needed to hear that until now. As we talked, plans began to form. We discussed regular visits, and possibly even weekend stays, making sure that Sam and Holly knew our home was always open to them. This time, we wouldn't let misunderstandings or manipulations keep us apart. It was clear that our role in their lives was crucial, now more than ever. We were determined to reclaim the time lost and mend the fractures that had formed in our family. "Not you. We never thought taking care of you and Holly would be a burden. We love you both more than words can express, and we always will." Sam's tears gradually subsided as he listened, his breathing slowing as the initial shock and hurt began to ebb away. It was clear that the misunderstandings and the distance had deeply affected him, shaping his perceptions and responses to our attempts to reconnect. "We've missed so much already, Sam," my husband continued, his voice thick with emotion. "We don't want to miss any more. No matter what's happened, we're your family, and that's never going to change." I held Sam close, feeling his body shake with each sob. It was a release of years of pent-up emotions, a mixture of sadness, betrayal, and relief. As he cried, I could feel the barriers between us beginning to crumble, the misunderstandings clearing as he finally understood our true feelings. After a while, Sam's crying ceased, and he pulled back slightly to look at us both. "I thought you didn't want us anymore," he whispered, the confusion still apparent in his voice. "That couldn't be further from the truth," I assured him. "We've tried everything we could think of to see you and Holly. Jasmine and your father, they made it difficult for us, and we're so sorry that caused you to feel abandoned." Sam nodded, processing this new information. "I just want things to be like they were when Mom was here," he said quietly, the longing clear in his voice. "We know, Sam, and we wish we could bring those days back," my husband said softly. "But while we can't change the past, we can work on making the future better. You and Holly are always welcome here, anytime, no questions asked. This is your home too." Sam looked around, perhaps seeing the familiar surroundings of our home in a new light. "Can I really come here whenever I want? Just to hang out, or if I need a break from everything?" "Absolutely," I replied without hesitation. "This door is always open to you and Holly. And if you need anything, help with school expenses, a meal, or just someone to talk to, we're here." For the first time that evening, a small, genuine smile tugged at Sam's lips. "Thank you, Grandma, Grandpa." I think I needed to hear that more than I realized. The conversation marked a turning point for us all. It was a promise, a commitment renewed. We would do everything in our power to support Sam and Holly, to ensure they never felt the sting of abandonment again. And though the road ahead might still hold challenges, we were ready to face them as a family, together. "Not yours." Ian's voice was cold, his posture stiff as he sat next to Jasmine. "You have no right to interfere in how we manage our family." Jerry's expression was grim, his fists clenched at his sides. "Managing? Is that what you call this?" He gestured around the cluttered, disheveled living room. "Your children were out in the rain, with no dinner, no care." I stepped forward, my heart racing, but my voice steady. "Ian, we're not here to fight. "We're here because Sam and Holly needed us tonight. They were cold, hungry, and scared." "Is this really the environment you want for them?" Jasmine, who had been silent, now spoke up with a dismissive wave of her hand, still holding her beer. "Look, Carolyn, you're blowing this out of proportion. Kids get upset, they run. That's normal." "Normal?" I echoed incredulously. "It's not normal for children to feel they have nowhere else to turn but to run to their grandparents' house in a storm. It's not normal for a brother to be so concerned about his sister that he risks his own health to protect her. This isn't about one bad night, Ian, Jasmine. This is about a pattern of neglect that we can no longer ignore." Ian looked away, uncomfortable, while Jasmine's face hardened. "You think you can just come here and judge us? You don't see the everyday. You don't know." "But we want to know," Jerry interjected. "We want to help, not just criticize. Let's find a solution that works for everyone, especially for Sam and Holly." The standoff lingered as tension simmered. Ian seemed torn, his gaze shifting between Jasmine and us. Finally, he spoke, his voice quieter. "What do you suggest?" "We suggest setting up regular visitation for us, so Sam and Holly have stability and another safe space. They need to know they have more than one place to turn to," I replied, trying to bridge the gap between us with a more constructive approach. "And," Jerry added, "we need transparency about their needs, financially and emotionally. We can help, you don't have to do this alone." Ian nodded slowly, considering our words. Jasmine seemed reluctant, but the seriousness of the situation was finally dawning on her as well. The conversation that night was difficult and fraught with emotional tension. Yet, it was a necessary step toward mending the fractured family dynamics. As we left Ian's house, the uncertainty of the outcome hung in the air like the mist of the earlier rain. But our resolve was clear: whatever it took, we would ensure that Sam and Holly had the love and support they needed to thrive. We drove home in silence, each lost in thoughts about the future, determined to follow through with our promise to protect and nurture our grandchildren, no matter the challenges ahead. We outlined our plans for Sam and Holly's ongoing education and well-being, ensuring that they would have all the necessary support to thrive, despite the upheavals they had faced. The lawyer was thorough, explaining each step of the adoption process and what it would entail. He also detailed the legal requirements for cutting off Ian and Jasmine's contact, which would require a court order given their parental rights. Although it was a daunting prospect to engage in such a legal battle, Jerry and I were steadfast in our commitment. "Our first priority is the children's well-being," I told the lawyer. "We need to ensure that Sam and Holly have a stable and loving environment. They've been through enough." Jerry nodded in agreement, his face set in a determined frown. "We're doing this not just because we want to, but because we have to. They need someone to fight for them, and we're here to do just that." The lawyer jotted down notes and nodded. "It's clear you both have the children's best interests at heart. I'll start drafting the necessary paperwork to begin the custody proceedings. It might be a challenging process, but given the circumstances, the court will likely see the merit in your case." In the days following our meeting with the lawyer, we prepared our home for the possibility of permanently welcoming Sam and Holly. We turned one of the spare rooms into a second bedroom for Holly, decorating it in bright colors and filling it with toys and books we thought she might like. For Sam, we updated his old room to reflect his current interests and needs, considering he was now a teenager with different requirements for space and privacy. Throughout this time, our emotions swung between anger at Ian and Jasmine for their neglect and excitement at the prospect of having Sam and Holly with us full-time. Despite the turmoil, the house felt alive with the anticipation of their return. Finally, the day came for the court hearing. Dressed in our most formal attire, we met with our lawyer outside the courthouse, ready to present our case. The hearing was intense, with testimonies from social services detailing the neglect and interviews with both Sam and Holly, who bravely expressed their desire to live with us. After what seemed like an eternity, the judge granted us temporary custody while the case for permanent adoption was considered. It was a significant first step, and although the road ahead was still fraught with legal hurdles, it was a victory we desperately needed. As we left the courthouse, Holly grasped my hand tightly, her small face upturned and smiling. "Does this mean I can stay with you and Grandpa now?" she asked. "Yes, Holly," I replied, squeezing her hand gently. "You're home now, for good." Sam, walking beside us, gave a small, relieved smile. It wasn't the end of our journey, but for the first time in a long while, it felt like a new beginning. With the weight of the immediate legal concerns temporarily lifted, we could focus on healing and building a future together as a family. And nurture their dreams and ambitions in an environment of unconditional love and support. As we settled into this new chapter, the children's presence redefined the very essence of what home meant to us. Sam, now more engaged in his schoolwork and extra activities, began to show signs of true healing. The anxieties that once shadowed his expressions were gradually replaced by a brightness, a reflection of his newfound stability and happiness. His academic performance improved, and his teachers often remarked on his contributions in class and his growing leadership qualities. Holly, with her innate empathy and keen sensitivity, blossomed in an environment where she felt seen and cherished. Her kindergarten teachers were full of stories about how she helped other children and how quickly she learned. Her curiosity and joy in the small things, a butterfly in the garden, a new book from the library, brought a fresh sense of wonder into our daily lives. Watching them both grow and adapt, overcoming the shadows of their past, made every effort and adjustment worthwhile. The decision to take them in, though born of necessity, had evolved into a profound blessing that touched every aspect of our lives. "Grandpa, can we go fishing again next Saturday?" Sam would ask, his eyes alight with anticipation. The fishing trips had become more than just a pastime, they were a symbol of the bond he shared with Jerry, a time for conversations not just about fish, but about life, dreams, and sometimes, the past. "Of course, Sam. You know, catching fish is much like tackling challenges in life, patience, resilience, and sometimes, knowing when to let go," Jerry would respond, imparting bits of wisdom in his gentle way. Holly, always wanting to be part of the adventures, insisted on learning how to fish too. One sunny morning, she managed to reel in her first small fish, her face a mixture of surprise and pride. "I did it, Grandma. I caught one," she exclaimed, holding up her prize for all to see. These moments, simple yet profound, filled our days with joy and laughter, pushing the darker memories further into the background. Life with Sam and Holly was not without its challenges, but each hurdle crossed seemed to strengthen the bonds between us. As I watched them from the kitchen window one afternoon, playing in the yard under the golden sunlight, I reflected on how far we had come. The worries that once loomed large about our capacity to provide them with what they needed had dissipated, replaced by a confident commitment to their well-being and happiness. In this home, they had found more than just safety, they had found a place where they could heal, grow, and dream. And as for Jerry and I, we found a renewed purpose in life, a reason to embrace each day with enthusiasm and love. The children had not only filled our home with laughter and activity, but had also filled our retirement years with a profound sense of fulfillment and joy. As the seasons changed and we watched Sam and Holly thrive, we knew that this home, once just a place of residence, had truly become a sanctuary, a haven not just from the physical storms of the world, but from the emotional and psychological tempests they had weathered. Our commitment to them was unwavering, and together, we looked forward to the future, whatever it might bring, with optimism and an unbreakable familial bond.